Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm with over 20 years of experience.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, or LTIF. It's focused on grocery-anchored retail real estate. These are the kinds of properties that some investors believe remain essential even in uncertain markets. People still need to buy food. That's what they say makes this sector more resilient and more stable over the long term.
Unlike many alternative investment funds that are only available to professionals, Greenman Open is open to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investments and a highly regulated structure.
Just remember, all investments carry risk. Values can go up or down, and past performance isn't a reliable guide to future returns. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but you should always speak to a financial advisor before investing. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Hello and welcome to this, our latest edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
Okay, we're doing another Thursday morning recording, but we have lots of material since we last spoke to you between this and the subscription edition. But I know that we'll definitely get in this edition to the rows about the bail laws, the Children's Hospital Ireland unfolding debacle, scandal, you could even say, and we'll see what else we get to as well before we go to the subscription edition. Let's start with the bail issue, Ivan. You wanted to bring up what happened. Very, very upsetting, sad case in Carlow last Sunday evening. A young man, 22, Evan Fitzgerald, who was facing charges which were due to be heard in the Naas District Court this week in relation to the possession of a machine gun and a revolver, which he managed to purchase apparently on the dark web. And he went into a shopping centre in Carlow and he started shooting in the air with a shotgun, not one of the two weapons that had been confiscated by the Gardaí previously. And then tragically he turned the shotgun on himself and took his own life. This has led to a lot of talk about the bail laws being inadequate. But I wonder, I think that there were some were jumping onto the bandwagon a little bit easily in relation to this. And I think Matt Carthy of Sinn Féin wrote a piece for the Irish Daily Mail and then came on the radio with me saying that, the bail laws need to be examined. And I said, well, what do you want? Do you want everybody who is on bail to be held pending trial? Oh, no. And he says, I want things to be, I want better interventions for young people and all the rest of it and stuff like that. In this particular case, and I see the Judge Ziden also pointed out this week that some of the reports since the incident have been inaccurate and that the Gardaí had not objected to bail and he wasn't in a position to enforce bail. But also, given that this was a case in the district court, I'm not sure that anyone who goes to the district court would be refused bail, would they?
Well, the first thing to be said, this could have been much, much worse.
Oh, could have been.
Could have been much worse. First of all, in relation to a shotgun versus other weaponry that he has had in the past, including some really sophisticated weapons, G3 Heckler and Koch machine gun, an AK-47, a Remington handgun.
Which he paid thousands of euro for, apparently.
Absolutely.
And he and others seem to be gun enthusiasts who went to one of the local woods or whatever and shot at targets there. It wasn't bought for anything with an intent of terrorist attack or going and actually menacing anyone or robbing anybody. But I suppose, as the Gardaí also pointed out, part of the problem was these guns could have been stolen from him by people with far more malign intent.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's been a very, very bad week for the government. There's a number of things I want to talk about. Secretary-General's completely lack of oversight, Children's Health Ireland, some really appalling developments on the housing front. And sometimes it doesn't hit you in one blow when there's a shock. Loss of authority, loss of credibility of the government. But what I'm referring to here is the politics of this, first of all, and I'll come back to the bail laws in a minute. So we have a situation that, as always, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin was doorstepped on Monday. What's your reaction to this? And he said there was a family in mourning. He castigated the social media, which had exaggerated reports about the number of injuries and fatalities which were false.
I'm sorry, can I just say there that there were some bad actors involved there. Some of the people on the far right who were almost disappointed when they discovered that this was not some foreign person who had actually been responsible for this.
And the third point he made was that there were constitutional limitations in relation to bail, which was a complete déjà vu moment for me, because I remember in the mid-1990s when we were in government, when I was in the cabinet, Nora Owen introduced a referendum on bail, which was overwhelmingly passed, which was supposed to deal with the constitutional issues. And, typical Jim O'Callaghan, who actually got the right mood music, unlike the Taoiseach, who completely misread the situation. Look, the overwhelming reaction here, in my opinion, on Monday morning and on Sunday night was, this is like something out of Florida or Texas, where someone is brandishing a gun, surrounded by civilians, and it could have been a terrible incident. Look, the reality is, I think we have to say, there was clear evidence that this 22-year-old was in some way disturbed.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was a dangerous situation that could have been much, much worse. And the level of weaponry and so on, like, it's an eye-opener to people. So
but this stuff is available. That we've prided ourselves, I think, over the years in that we don't allow people to have guns.
We don't allow the Gardaí to have guns.
Indeed, but now there are more people who have guns than you think, have legally
I have
shotgun.
a gun myself, yes. I have a shotgun, a single barrel shotgun, and I use it to kill rodents or whatever. But it used to be every year. I have to go to the Garda barracks in Enniscorthy. I have to present my ID. I think it's every 2 or 3 years now. But it's purely as a farmer that you get that, as a landowner.
Sorry, I'm distracted with this. Do you enjoy going out shooting?
No, I tell you what, I might only use it once every 2 years. I don't use it much, but there are certain times.
Are you a dead-eye shot?
I actually, would you believe it? I went on something. They do these kind of stag things, and they introduce the older people. When my son-in-law was getting married, they brought me to a clay pigeon shoot. I'd never been to one before. Would you believe it? Out of about 20 shots, I got every one of them bullseye. I actually surprised myself because I thought I had no abilities in that direction. But I digress from what is a very...
I digress too.
Yes. So it's a very serious incident for which people could have been killed. Now, we have highlighted on this programme that 1,000 prisoners in the last year have been released within 24 hours of being committed to prison. We have a statistic which is really quite shocking, that 40,348 crimes have been committed by people on bail over the recent period. 64 of those involving firearm offences. The situation is that bail is too easily obtained, too easily not opposed and granted, and this is because of the overcrowding in prisons. The prison population, which is catering for a capacity of bed nights of about 1,300, has, and you've highlighted this many times, has on average 1,550 or so in prison at any one night. Now, the Minister for Justice updated the Cabinet on plans to accelerate nearly 1,960 spaces by the end of the decade, but we are operating at about 120% over capacity.
Okay, there's a whole range of things here, and I think a distinction has to be drawn between people who have been convicted of crimes and who are released prematurely from jail, or who don't go to jail because of overcrowding. And I've argued on this podcast many times, despite the fact that you think that I'm a sort of a wet liberal, that we actually do need increased prison spaces because of the fact that we have an increased population, and also because of the fact that there are some people who just need to be punished for what they did, and also prison should be a place for rehabilitation. Okay, so that's
and
the
more
first
especially
thing.
Shouldn't be at large.
Yeah, it shouldn't be at large. Okay, so let's say that. Now, there's a difference when it comes to bail, right? Because I suppose there are two categories, there's a number of categories of people who, when they are on remand facing charges, need to be treated in a different way. if you have somebody, for example, who is charged with murder, like a Richard Satchwell was in October 2023, you do not give somebody like that bail when there is a high likelihood that they are going to skip the country if they were given bail. And that wasn't prejudging the outcome of the trial, Richard Satchwell, for example, but it would have made no sense to give somebody like that bail. I'll give you another example of somebody who shouldn't have got bail. And I've brought this up previously before about the young Midland student, Joe Drennan, who was killed in Limerick, 21-year-old, standing at a bus stop when he was mown down by a thug, Kieran Fogarty, who was trying to escape Garda attention. He was on bail for very serious firearms offences, not just the possession of guns, but actually for participating in a drive-by shooting. And he received subsequently an 8-year sentence for that. He received a lesser sentence in relation to killing Joe Drennan, and that is now being appealed by the DPP. So we let that work out, but I would have had the question is, why the hell was somebody who had facing charges about a drive-by shooting at people's houses, why was somebody like that on remand or was out on bail? But then you come to the case of this young man who the Gardaí didn't object to bail for because I think they saw him.
There is confusion about that because
the judge said
no,
they
I
did
saw
not.
Sorry, the bit that's confusing, absolutely. In the technical terms, it wasn't refused, but that was Judge Desmond Zaidan in Naas District Court, right? And the case was he was due to appear in court this Wednesday, Mr. Fitzgerald. So the situation is that what I took from the Garda statement about that was that the original terms of the bail being sought, which was open-ended, was opposed by the Gardaí, but wasn't opposed when it was a more restrictive form of bail was prescribed.
And apparently he'd lived up to all of the actual requirements to stay off the internet, the whole range of things that he was told that he had to do and stuff, and he did that, and then they relaxed it. But there was never and there is this issue as well. If you are going to have remanding people on bail, not giving them bail, remanding people in custody, then you should have a special dedicated prison for that, which isn't, well, you maybe have different security standards. You might have very serious crimes been accused of that you have to have them well locked up. Others may not require the same level, but they shouldn't necessarily, if you're on suspicion of carrying out a crime, be in prison in Mountjoy or somewhere like that in advance of a decision being taken. Now, also, or a court verdict having been handed down. Also, there is a difference between somebody who, in this case of this young man, Fitzgerald, had never come to the attention of the Gardaí before, and others who are serial criminals. Right? Absolutely. Are serial offenders. There's a big difference between if somebody has been shown to have offended while on bail or is facing more charges, well, that's where you should be taking a tougher line.
But Matt, this is in the same week as the Minister for Justice issued a public state apology to the family of Shane O'Farrell, who again was killed in a hit-and-run driving incident when someone should have been in prison. They were on bail. No, the reality...
There's a difference, I think, in that case, isn't there? But again, it's not just that they should have been in prison, that they had been released prematurely, and there's suspicions as to why that actually happened. This was somebody who had been convicted.
Okay.
Rather than somebody who was facing charges.
But the point is, the principle here is, are there people at large, are there maybe 1,000 people at large, that it isn't actually an accident, it's an incident waiting to happen in the context of that the justice system is not working. So therefore, instead of the government dealing with all sorts of issues of deflection, the simple question is, and you've been around long enough, Micheál, for 30 years to have a view on this, the bail law relates to 1997. It was reformed by the government after the referendum. So we're now at the stage, given all these incidents of 40,000 crimes committed by people on bail, horrendous situations like this particular incident, where the minister is actually appointing a senior counsel to review it, which will lead to a report, which is not a result. And like this level of sort of I would just say government apathy and indifference is going to have very serious... Someone is going to get killed simply because of this. And it's not for lack of highlighting.
Oh, sorry, people have been killed previously.
And I actually thought that Matt Ducati was right in a lot of these cases in highlighting this.
Well, sorry, they have to, first of all, there's a presumption of innocence. That's the bedrock of a legal case. Say if you were accused of something, I think you would want to be in a position where you would be presumed innocent until found guilty in a court, and that if you applied for bail, that you would feel that you would be fairly given the opportunity and then you would turn up for trial. Now, I think that remains something, unless there are specific reasons, such as you are a flight risk or you might be a danger to other people, you have a criminal record. Those are situations where absolutely you should be denied bail. But this idea that an allegation or a charge being brought against you means immediate detention is not a position that we should actually be going to.
So what is the safety risk assessment here? I think that must come into it as well.
Well, it does.
No, that's what I'm saying. It should be a vital part of the criteria. And a 22-year-old with militarized weaponization in his hands, given that it's quite unusual or odd for someone to have such a fixation with guns. And, there are also reports that he may have other friends and colleagues. I don't know if there's a WhatsApp group or what connection, that this may actually rebound beyond the Fitzgerald case into other cases. And so therefore, I think this has to be taken very seriously. But it underlies the major problem. Prison incapacity, revolving door in terms of people, no sooner they checked into prison, they're checked out, and also the issue of lack of prison spaces.
The reason I brought up Matt Carty was because when I put it to him, what do you want? He said, we need an examination, we need a review, blah, blah. There's an examination or review on the way.
We need tighter bail, in my opinion.
Well, he wouldn't actually spell out what it was. He then started talking about diversion for younger people before they get into trouble, which is all fine, which is all correct. But that doesn't deal with the specific question put to him, what changes do you want made to the bail laws, rather than giving out about all of the people who have offended while on bail awaiting trial on other issues.
But on this issue, what we're going to get is in December, some senior counsel's report, and the government are going to refer to some committee, and we'll be having this discussion in a year's time. OK, let's talk about Children's Hospital Ireland, because we're getting these consistent feed of revelations now about behaviour at the hospitals under its remit. For example, there's all sorts of allegations been made of bullying and bad behaviour by seniors towards others. But I suppose the one that's really jumped out and grabbed the attention is about this now retired consultant who it seems, and let me sort of just summarise this for a second, Ivan, and hopefully have all the details of this correct. But it seems that he did a certain amount of work during the week in his job as a public paid consultant. And then because he wasn't able to deal with all of the lists of people, certain children were moved onto his private list to be seen at the weekend on his private list, paid for by the National Treatment Purchase Fund in the same hospital where he was doing his daily work. And would you believe that when he was working on a Saturday, he was able to see twice as many patients as he had been able to see on a daily basis during the week? A much higher level of productivity and throughput when it got to that stage, when he was getting the additional pay that was coming from the state under the National Treatment Purchase Fund. And then to add to it, it turns out for the 3 years before he retired, he was, because he unwell enough to do the on-call evenings and weekends that is required of these doctors. And it costs the state €450,000 to cover him with locums, right? So all sorts of issues arise in relation to that. Now, I see as well that a file on this has been sent to An Garda Síochána as well, so we have to be careful not to identify this particular individual. But a number of things struck me as well in relation to his increased productivity at the weekends. One listener to The Last Word last night argued, maybe he was rushing things at the weekend and was doing things at a safe pace during the week. I would wonder, was he slowing things down during the week so as to get the numbers onto the weekend list so he could get paid for it there? And, it just looks like
the National Treatment Purchase Fund was set up, if I remember correctly, as a way to clear the lists, clear the backlog. But it now seems to have become an incentive for doctors to sort of, maybe some doctors, I'm not saying all, to slow down their public work during the week so that they can move stuff onto a private list during the week. And the hospitals themselves are happy enough for this as well, because then means they also get a payment for the use of facilities at the weekend that would otherwise be shut. And it also goes back to something we've discussed in this show before, is that how can hospitals only be working on a 5-day working week? They clearly, the theatres, the operating theatres and stuff can be used on a Saturday, but they're not being used on a week-round basis by the state. They're closed down at the weekends unless they're used for what they call insourcing by the National Treatment Purchase Fund to allow additional payments to be made to the doctors and additional income to come into the hospital. I summarise that?
And I just add a few bits of detail on it, and I want to commend the Irish Times for the work that they have done on this.
And indeed the Sunday Times, Irish Edition Sunday, has done some of the work as well.
So the specifics of this are... So we've moved from a situation where this guy was allegedly gaming the system to allegedly defrauding the system, and hence it's been referred to the Gardaí. This is unbelievable. You couldn't make it up in a banana republic. The particular number of children he was able to see on a Saturday was 179 children at an additional cost just to him, leaving aside the overtime or whatever for the other facilities in the outpatient clinic, 35,800. This only arose because he was, for health reasons, unable to do the work on a 5-day week basis. The reason why this is very important is two things. This all happened in 2021. Children's Health Ireland got a report about this in 2022. Not only did they not refer to the department, not refer to the Gardaí, not refer to the HSE, which is oversight. Now let's put this in context. Children's Health Ireland was set up to actually provide a governance and board and oversight structure for the merging of Temple Street Children's Hospital, the paediatric department in Tala, and Crumlin Children's Hospital. And so therefore you got this merged entity. And once the hospital is commissioned, the National Paediatric Development Board will slip away and CHI will have responsibility for the biggest bazooka in our health service, the most costly ever, the $2.5 billion National Children's Hospital. The question must be asked, are CHI fit to run the National Children's Hospital? I think... some of the toxicity of what has been revealed is that they're not fit for purpose. They have no proper oversight. And the fact of the matter is that, leaving aside all the essence of what you are talking about with the consultant, the fact that they didn't see fit to publish, all the stuff we're now reading in 2025 should have been brought to us in 2022. And I don't see how the minister, Jennifer O'Connell, can have can have any confidence in CHI, and it needs to be restructured from top to bottom.
I think that's pretty inevitable. That's what's happening with the resignations from the board, with people from the HSE being put in as replacements of the board, that it will be folded in.
And this all comes on top of kids given alloy springs put into their spine, a huge potential dysplasia of 2,200 kids that may be a future tribunal of awards in terms of operations that may have been not necessary, all under the watch of CHI. Where is the government in all of this?
We need to take a break. When we come back, we will talk in particular about some senior civil servants, Una Buckley and Graham Doyle, and their public interventions into matters relating to housing and infrastructure. All of that to come after this short break.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. The fund is managed in Ireland. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.ie. Greenman.com.
Now, before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments could go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Welcome back to Path to Power. So let's talk about, it just actually happened. We recorded last Thursday, and it was after that it came to attention, two things involving senior public officials. Graham Doyle, Secretary General in the Department of Housing, Una Buckley, Secretary General in the Department of the Environment, or whatever you call all the various parts of that now. She made what I thought was absolutely extraordinary statement at a conference where she said you can actually have your supply to the data centres or you can have your supply to houses, but you can't have both. And we'll stick with that one for a moment before we get to the Graham Doyle one. And she was pretty much comprehensively rebuked by Jack Chambers and Micheál in particular, and then implicitly by Micheál Martin, when Jack Chambers said it's not a binary option, you have to do both. And Micheál Martin has been very busy over the last week emphasising the requirement, the need to have data centres. And my view on this, Ivan, and see what you think in relation to this, is that it is absolutely essential that we actually do both. That if we say, oh, these data centres take up too much electricity, we can't be having that, they're sucking up too much of it, that's all well and good. But with the artificial intelligence-led economy, which is coming at us at absolute speed, which we discussed last week and which I got a lot of very good feedback from people who were delighted that we were actually discussing it. If you take it that it is inevitable that economies are going to be developed according to the use of artificial intelligence, and if you want to protect the corporation tax revenues that are supplied to us by the companies that are involved in artificial intelligence, we have to move heaven and earth to have the electricity supplies. Now, the fear is that, as usual, we'll talk about what we need to do but fail to deliver. But I don't think we could have that level of defeatism from the Secretary General of a major department about this, that you actually have to have, they have to buy into what the government policy is. And the government policy clearly is to deliver this electricity infrastructure. What do you think?
Well, first of all, this is a matter of cause and effect. So she said, we have to cap the data centres because there's not enough electricity to go down. And I want to quote Dara's response. The policy priorities set down by the elected government in the programme for government clearly outline the government's position in relation to large energy users. As a government, we have prioritised increased and unprecedented investment in our grid and expanding our energy generation with a particular priority on renewable energy sources. We have been clear in our desire to facilitate further FDI and Indigenous investment, including the need to facilitate new technologies and data storage. The government are committed to these objectives. So the situation here is this, that about 10 years ago, total consumption by data centres of our electricity output was about 4%. Today it's 21%, and it is headed for the data centres that are up and running simply due to more cloud storage. It requires 8 times the electricity as previous internet and other searches. It's going to go to over 30%. The fact of the matter is, this is a huge legacy issue of the last government and Eamon Ryan, insofar as people have been screening at them, because like EirGrid and everyone else and the CRU did a report to say what our electricity consumption would be 2035, 2032. They said it's going to rise by 4%. Your electric vehicles, your growth in population, as well as data centres. And they've been screaming this for some time. Because I was down in Clare yesterday working on a particular onshore wind farm. I've declared interest, it's all on lobbying.ie. The reality of it is that over the last almost 2 years, Bord Pleanála were the basis for granting planning permission for onshore wind farms. We need 4,500 megawatts of onshore wind before offshore wind comes, because we have 35% renewable electricity. The target is to go to 80%. Actually, now Bord Pleanála, instead of granting, because the local authorities weren't granting them, from Donegal down to Kerry, basically Bord Pleanála stopped granting them. And so basically what needs to be done is the rezoning, the permissible areas, needs to be expanded in the 31 local authorities that can have this. All subject to the national wind guidelines, that you're 800 metres back from a house, that you have grid access and all of these issues. That is the fundamental problem. In the same way as housing, the problem about this data centre row is actually that there's not enough electricity and power generation. And so what actually happened was they had to get 2 gigawatts of emergency gas generation just to keep the lights on, because we peaked on the 12th of January this year. Electricity demand went for the first time over 6 gigawatts at a given time. So the reality here is this. that Una Buckley is only saying, well, given our total failure to get offshore electricity before 2031, and I've told you about the Array, Nissa, Oriel and all the projects Codling Bay that are stuck in the mud with Bord Pleanála with no visibility in the next 18 months of getting planning permission, which is just a total head wreck, and it's going round in circles, that she is now copped onto the fact, well, given that the electricity isn't there, you're going to have a choice, like they had in Castle Bagot, I think it was, in West Dublin, where who do you give the new substation there? Who do you give the electricity to? Do you give it to new housing connections or do you give it to data centre? So what she was just saying was, look, we are where we are. Given the gestation time and all these development plans are not going to be changed to facilitate wind energy. And it should be said, all this has been done by private developers. It's not this costing the state. The grid is costing the state money. I was
going to come to that because there's a whole range of issues here.
She was only telling the reality. There ain't enough. You're going to have to decide. So if you say, and I agree totally, because we've lost the first round of generative AI investment, 15 billion has left the country. I've told you about Amazon. Their next 38 billion has fled the country simply because of this. But the corollary of that, and the point she was making, was you're not going to have electricity for housing connections. You've highlighted how there won't be permission granted because there's no water. This again is the inept failure of systemic failure of government to actually get through the planning system.
Yeah, but the failure is of politicians, but it's also a failure of civil servants. And it's civil servants saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I take your point in relation to Una Buckley pointing out the reality of where we're at and the rest of it. However, can you imagine, say, that if you were at the AGM of a company and the chief executive set out for the shareholders what was the ambitions of the company or what to do, and then if the chief operating officer literally says, well, actually, by the way, we can't do that, it's actually going to have to be one or the other, there would be absolute mayhem. The position of one or the other would be, how are they going to actually work with each other? How can you have a state official coming out and saying this publicly? It's the same in relation to Graham Doyle and the Department of Housing. How can Graham Doyle stand up at a conference and say, I voted against, or I don't like the idea of a housing czar, I don't think we need it. And then we get this sort of the semantics afterwards. Oh, what he was complaining about was the use of the term and the rest of it. Given the hostility that he has shown to the term, we don't know, we've been told he's not hostile to the position. Now that they're setting up this housing activation office and that they're actually advertising for a person who will be working to Graham Doyle, who's going to want to take the job when it's been quite clear that the civil servant doesn't want the position.
In fairness, what I'm saying is Darragh O'Brien is perpetrating the illusion, even delusion, that there'll be enough electricity for data centres and houses. That's the point that I think she was making, and I think that's factually correct. It gets even worse. So Graham Doyle And I know Graham Doyle, I have respect for him, he has his critics and all the rest of it, but the fact of the matter is, what he said at Property Industry Ireland, which is
lobbying group
within IBEC, but it covers everything from architects to property owners to construction industry, whereas the CIF is just representing mainly contractors. So it represents developers. And he was guest speaking at that, as was the Minister. What he actually said was that, yes, the Housing Activation Office is in the programme for government. This idea that you'd have 120 sites and you'd draw together ESB, water, local authorities, get the roads there and get everything and get the planning and get the zoning and get everything tied together, a good idea. And he said that office will have to have a CEO. What he said was just another illusion that someone can come along and simply by calling them the Tsar, you're creating the expectation that they have superpowers, that they can simply wave a wand, knock heads together and make things happen. And what he was saying is the term Tsar, as opposed to a CEO of an activation office, is not a good idea because it raises false expectations. And I think he was absolutely telling the truth.
Yeah, but for the government never actually called the position a Tsar. That was a media type creation.
Was it? Well, but I thought the minister used it in an interview on the News at One. He had sort of adopted it, whoever created it. But you know the latest news, which is really, it is a comedy show, right? It transpired who torpedoed the housing czar. It's in today's paper.
Oh, yeah, the Department of Public Expenditure.
Department of Public Expenditure. No, we're not going to sanction this post. It requires, over a certain amount. We have to we're not going to. So here you have a situation where Jack Chambers, the Minister for Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, is issuing saying, oh, no, that we're definitely going ahead with the Tsar. And his own department and his Secretary General, David Maloney, vetoed it. Like, what in the name of God is going on? There's disconnect between ministers, and this is what I'm saying.
Hold on a second. Who are the department secretaries to be vetoing a decision that has been made by the government? Sorry, who's actually in control here?
This is my point. The fact of the matter is, the one who put the kibosh on the appointment of Brendan McDonagh at $430,000 was not actually Simon Harris. It was the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform who said, sorry, we're just not agreeing to this. We don't see the business case for this. We don't believe it's value for money.
And they may well be right. And
yes.
they were correct in their assessment.
They're doing their job.
Yeah, but should the government not have...
No, but maybe Jack Chambers should have a chat with his officials and say, here am I giving out about Fine Gael vetoing this, when actually it was my own department. So, what I'm trying to say is this. This is a comedy of errors. And if you take these cases with some of the other things I'm going to focus on today, I actually think that, the government are swimming in a sea of complacency. There is no sense of urgency, and they are a government totally, even within the echelons of senior staffs, devoid of authority. And they need to get a grip and fast. They have two opportunities. The review of the National Development Plan, which will be a huge launch. We'll probably get Kilmainham, what do they call it, the Royal whatever.
Royal Hospital.
Well, yeah, all the things. They're going to do a review of housing for all and all these things. But the truth of it is...
It's implementation is the issue.
Absolutely. And delivery. Delivery is the issue. But can I just pole vault into housing, because here we go again. 'Tis now property, right? It's a property development company, and for years I've heard from people in Cork, we need to deal with the Dublin bursting at the seams, not having the capacity, and the way to do it is to have a second city developed in Cork. And the big new idea was to get Cork Port out of the Docklands area. I think it's around the Porky Keeve area. As you drive in on the Dublin side, you'll know more about this than me. So basically...
So it's both sides of the river. Sorry, okay. There's a lot that can be done on the Tivoli side, which is where when you drive in past the new Spaghetti Junction of all the various... It is a bit difficult to work out which direction are you going. Are you heading for the tunnel, the Jack Lynch tunnel to go under the river? Are you heading up towards the city? But when you head up towards the city, Docklands area there in Tivoli, there's a potential. And then across the river, when you see Parky Queeve up beyond that, there's an enormous potential. Already work has been done, although they're finding it more difficult than they anticipated because of contaminated land from the old Dunlops and Ford's plants and all the rest of it and stuff. But anyway, basically, you could, between those locations on each side of the river, you could have 25,000 new housing units.
Okay, so last Friday evening it came to my attention that Tisnow property applied for 823 apartments, 6 blocks, very big blocks, 35 up to 35 stories high, to deliver 282 one-bedroom apartments, 414 two-bedroom apartments, and 127 bedroom apartments. The modernisation in terms of residential development in the Docklands area, this was a huge flagship project in the Taoiseach's constituency, and here we have launches for the Cluas and all predicated on this happened.
Sorry, the clue has been the proposed Cork version of the Lewis.
So this is a 5-hectare site, right? It's currently the location of Cork's Live at the Marquee, seasonal theme park, Funderland, totally underutilised. Now, this was not just an ad hoc development. It had commercial facilities, cafes, restaurants, pubs, retail units, a library, a medical centre, a post office, a pharmacy. This was a world-class development, right? And 4 new pedestrian bridges were proposed around the former Ted Castle's yard to the marina, and car parking spaces.
It's a lovely walk from the city centre down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, down the marina. Or there's a couple of different routes you can actually take, but it's all actually within walking distance of the city centre if you're prepared to have a walk. You think now this flag,
it got virtually no attention from the media.
I wasn't aware of it.
No, and it was refused on a Friday, which is always a great day to dump bad news out. But anyway, do you think there was a reaction from the Taoiseach to say, oh my God, basically what happened is, short and simple, Bord Pleanála said no. And you see, there was no local authority involvement insofar as what they call an SID, structural infrastructure development. It has to go to the board. So here we have a situation.
So, on what grounds did they say no? And did they say no? go back to the drawing board, or did they say no because of this, and this? But if you fix that, we'll give you the permission.
You know what they said? One of the reasons it would prejudice the future provision of education facilities within the Cork Docklands area.
What?
It's unbelievable. The proposed development would therefore be contrary to proper planning and sustainable development in the area. I mean, does the right hand know what the left hand is doing?
But this is a bit like chicken and egg, isn't it? Do you have to build the school first before you actually allow for the housing to be built? Or do you have to allow the housing to be built first and then put the... Now, I know proper planning, and we've talked about it, and the Adamstown development and Clongriff and all those things.
And Clonburst have been very successful.
And they've all doing things side by side and the rest of it. But if we have a housing emergency, I mean, then you start building these apartment blocks, and then you actually also simultaneously start planning and putting in the schools and stuff. And apparently, I mean, somebody was telling me recently that there's something like 88 schools ready to go, as in the planning has been done for them or the designs have been drawn out and they're ready to go in locations all over the country. And there just isn't government sign-off on actually paying the money to actually go ahead with them. But all the work has actually been done to make sure that they can be built straight away.
So you put yourself in Tisnow's space. They spent 3 years. And I would say this project, a bit like Clonleff, the 800 development there beside Croke Park.
1800.
So 1583 to be exact. That was a 600 million. This project will be about 400 or 500 million of really revitalising Cork. And here we have, so there's 14 people on the board of Bord Pleanála. Nobody knows who they are. And you know what? To be honest with you, if you and I were Taoiseach, we'd actually appoint people to the board who maybe weren't from the Planning Institute or on Tashka or something like that, who actually get things done in this goddamn country. The fact of the matter is, this is a credibility joke, that you have all these grandiose plans to redevelop the Corkland area as a national flagship second city project, and it's simply turned down, albeit on the inspector's recommendation here. And the bottom line here is this, that another of the reasons for refusal, seriously detract from the visual amenities and character of the area. I mean, give me a break. We either have a housing emergency and...
Sorry, can I tell you one thing? That actually area is perfectly suited to having high-rise development, the density. I mean, it's not far from the Elysian which is a landmark building in Cork city centre. We're talking about an area which you can't say that, it doesn't look great. A lot of the old, broken down, former industrial sites there, this would actually give it a new life.
It is now faced with two options. They either take a judicial review themselves to have this reconsidered, which will take 2 years, cost a lot of money. I'd say they spent 2 or 3 million on the project to date, leaving aside the site costs and all of that. Or they could talk to Bord Pleanála. And so what they could have done here is they could have granted permission to go no higher than 28 stories. They could have done various conditions they could have put on planning to try and make it operative. But this means that there'll be no potential of an approved decision on this for a further 2 years. All at a while, what's revealed today, that emergency homeless people is now almost 16,000. And the average cost, weekly cost, of someone being, this cost to the state of putting someone in emergency accommodation is $3,000 a week. It varies a year between 140 and 160. We call it an average of 150. That's $3,000 a week. You'd stay in a lot of good hotels for that. This country has become dysfunctional and nobody seems to care about it. And nobody, more especially, is actually taking responsibility for it. And it is the job of the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach to say, I am going to deal with this. And they're actually just not on the right page.
A couple of things, Ivan, that I want to finish out on. Actually, when it comes to the housing, sorry, just that.
What about the attics?
Well, that's what I was just about to bring up.
Yeah.
Because this seems to be the government's solution to the housing crisis.
Well, this is a good solution, in my opinion.
Okay,
to liberalising some of the red tape that's tying up local authorities.
Okay, sticking plaster solution, I would suggest. Okay, I'm not saying that I'm against it, right? But there are issues in relation to whether you're going to be building suitable accommodation in the back garden for granny to be moved out into, or for the kids to be in while they're saving their money to try and find some non-existent place to actually buy or to even rent in some cases because they're so expensive. I'm not sure, and also this thing, you can go ahead with an extension. At present, you can do an extension up to 40 square metres. And even then, sometimes you'll end up in a row with the neighbours because you might be blocking their light and stuff. This is going to cause issues as to how far are you able to go to build the so-called granny extension, for how many years granny might actually be there. A little bit of a sticking plaster solution to that. Now, what I want to bring up with you, actually...
No, can I just on the planning exemption one, okay? This is absolutely common sense. In a week whereby they've dusted down the recommendations 3 years ago, 2022, the CEOs of local authorities made a submission to government to say we need more planning staff. So they actually identified 541 places. It's now, how many of those have been actually recruited?
About 20%, is it?
1 in 6.
Yeah,
1 in 6.
less.
15%. They're either at the stage, they're still in the process of advertising, they haven't been approved or whatever.
So do we know why that is? I know that they actually were going to open up the visa programme to bring in people from
as a
outside
critical
of
skill.
Europe.
English speaking from Canada, New Zealand,
does that
or whatever.
suggest that either A, we don't have enough of these people in the country, or is it that the terms and conditions of the job aren't attractive to them?
No, what actually happened was Bord Pleanála increased their staff by 200 and all of them came from local authorities. So they just cannibalised the staff. That's what happened. But in terms of, so here we are, a chronic shortage. They can't do pre-planning meetings. They can't do basic things that they did for decades, right? And so they're actually tied up at looking at people's bicycle covers, a little bit of perspex at the side. They're bin covers. Now, my own son in he calls it Castleknock, I call it Blanchardstown, has an attic conversion. Costs about maybe 15,000, 20,000. And I actually sleep in the bedroom and he developed a little office. It's a perfect job. It's a new estate built in the last 10 years. These attic conversions, people aren't going to spend 20 grand and do a botched job. It opened up a completely idle space. These attics, right, should be exempt from planning. And I actually was there the other day and I saw notices in the garden of people retrospectively applying for planning permission at a time of an acute shortage of planning. This is absolute common sense. We need to deregulate all this red tape of jobs where it's going around with their clipboards inspecting this and inspecting that, and they don't have the basic function to get housing approvals done.
Okay, so the attic conversion is not just for grandma, it's for granda as well. Okay, right, okay.
Or for if you want to put an office working from home you're very fond of, all the usual stuff.
Okay, well, one final one. Could it be that fox hunting is going to destroy the newfound unity of the left? Because I was very interested to see this week that Ruth Coppinger from People Before Profit, sorry, this was last week, was bringing forward a bill to try and ban fox hunting. And very unusually, you know the procedures here. Normally, stage one is not a true. You go into stage...
Which is really the publication of the bill.
Yeah, and there's no vote in stage one, except a vote was called and Danny Healy-Rae and a couple of other independents were against the bill and argued against it and forced a vote. And Sinn Féin voted against it as well. And I think not just People Before Profit, but the Social Democrats are livid with Sinn Féin. Where do you stand on the idea of fox hunting? Given that you revealed yourself to be a crack shot with the shotgun earlier, where are you? Do you shoot foxes?
Unlike you, who have fence sores from sitting on the fence, I can be absolutely equivalent. There are 42 registered hunts in this country. And in my own county of Wexford, there would be the Bree hunt, the Killinnick Harriers, and the Island hunt, just to name three. And they are strictly regulated in the way they chase what is a pest. Foxes will kill lambs and eat them.
Very rarely.
Says who?
If you
Says
actually look at the
someone
stats.
in D4 who wouldn't know a fox. I have actually a fox in my front garden every morning.
So do I. They're all over fucking Dublin 6 rather than Dublin 4.
That is true.
There are foxes everywhere that you
Codes of practice were put in place for fox hunting in 1976 and 2013. This is a typical socialist Trotskyite attack on the traditional pursuits and values of rural Ireland.
Traditional
they
pursuits
would ban
and values
fishing.
Imported by the British.
Yeah,
this is the irony.
In the 1740s.
No,
so now it's
a
little bit... the Brits now are blamed for everything.
Sorry,
they
Sinn
actually
Féin,
left 100 years ago.
Sinn Féin normally blame the Brits for everything, and Sinn Féin are adopting position of imported shooting. Now, even the British have given up. They don't allow these
they've gone to the left or right. No, the situation is...
They've gone to actually making sure that they don't just slaughter animals unnecessarily.
I can also say this, okay? So you're a farmer. And you go out in the field and there's like a bloated bullock or a bloated sheep and they're dead. What do you do with it? You send it to the knackery, which is the kennels, right? It performs a vital function of dealing with the waste of dead animals. That, burying them as problematic. You'd have to put quicklime and so on. But what I'm saying is this.
You're not claiming now that the cows are being killed by the fox as well.
No, what I am saying is this. Hands off our, Oscar Wilde called it the unspeakable in pursuit of the uneatable. There's a lot of people who regard this as West Brit, toffs and all the rest of it. If you go into rural Ireland, leaving aside all the point-to-points they organise, hundreds of them, which are vital to the national hunt racing scene. These are pursuits. Ruth Coppinger, Matt Cooper, just don't be losing any sleep over this. You get on with your life. No one's forcing you to follow a hunt. No one's forcing you to do anything but live and let live.
Hold on, but do you think it's okay to go shooting animals? Hunt animals for sport.
Vermin. So no, like the fact of the matter is, don't underestimate that foxes cause damage. And I can absolutely see where rural TDs are coming from, because this is a rural pursuit, and if where will it stop? They'll want to ban greyhound racing. They'll want to ban fishing. They'll want to ban all these things. And so,
the badger cull has been a disaster. It didn't actually help eradicate TB at all, and all you've done is damage the ecosystem.
Well, I think the figure was around 30% of the infection, and given the huge rise in TB rates, I'm still of the view that the badgers are a contributory factor. But the point about it is this.
Sorry, hold on a second. And I'm really dicing, I suppose, with danger by asking this question, given what you've already supported, actually going after the fox hunts, are being involved with fox hunts. Do you support hare coursing?
The situation is that in my time, we introduced muzzles on the greyhounds. I have been to hare coursing, and I actually found it objectionable back in the day when there was thing. And actually, the GRI don't promote coursing, and it's a source of great division. But I actually think with the muzzles in place, over 90% of the hares do escape. And
traumatized though by their
put it like this:
experience.
I just didn't enjoy hair coursing, to be honest with you, in the way
So
that
your views are often on the basis of what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy.
No, I'm much more in favour with fox hunting or anything, regulating rather than banning it, because it just makes woke people feel better about themselves.
In our subscription edition, we are going to spend a considerable bit of time, I think, on the Gerry Adams libel action outcome and the potential for that in the presidential election race. And we have many of your questions that we're going to answer as well. So that's for those of you who have chosen to subscribe. So from today, from me, Matt Cooper.
From me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you very much for being with us.